I have a reservation under the name Evelyn. Today is my birthday. I'm sorry, but there are no tables available. Everything is fully booked, and there is no reservation under the name Evelyn, ma'am. Oh my God. Why is that? I made a reservation, Mrs. Evelyn exclaimed in panic. The waiter remained silent, his cold and disdainful attitude showing. How will things unfold? Let's stay tuned for the rest of the story. Wishing you a great day. Evelyn, an older black woman with silver hair and kind eyes, took slow, steady steps into her favorite restaurant, her heart filled with joy and excitement. Today was her birthday, a day she had been looking forward to celebrating with the familiar smiles and simple pleasures she had come to cherish here. This restaurant wasn't just a place to eat. It was a sanctuary of memories, where she had shared countless moments of happiness with family and friends. But today, something felt off. The moment she walked in, instead of the warm, familiar greetings she expected from the staff, she was met with a cold, uncomfortable atmosphere. She glanced around, her eyes landing on a young man, the new server. His gaze was filled with annoyance, his face showing an unmistakable air of arrogance, as though her presence was a disturbance. Evelyn didn't let his attitude affect her. Keeping her smile gentle, she approached him and said in a soft voice, "Hello, I have a reservation under Evelyn's name. It's my birthday today." But instead of the welcoming response she hoped for, he barely looked at her before coldly saying, "Sorry, no tables are available. Everything is reserved." Evelyn froze, a mix of surprise and confusion washing over her. She had made a reservation in advance and had been here countless times, knowing most of the staff by name. She never expected to be turned away so indifferently. Looking into the server's unwelcoming eyes, she suddenly realized that the issue wasn't just about no available tables. The situation escalated when the manager arrived, and a secret about Evelyn's identity slowly came to light. She wasn't just any guest, she was the mother of the restaurant's owner. Would the young man recognize his mistake in time? Or would this be the most costly lesson of his career? "I'm sorry, but I called yesterday and confirmed my reservation," Evelyn said gently, though her voice carried a note of weariness. The server sighed impatiently and responded curtly, "I told you, no tables. You should find somewhere else to go." Evelyn's heart sank with hurt. She had been a loyal customer here for years, knew all the servers by name, and had never been treated like this. But this time, she felt something larger at play, a feeling that was all too familiar. The look from the server wasn't just a sign of rudeness, but of something more deeply ingrained. It was a look she had experienced since childhood, one she often encountered when walking into offices, schools, or public spaces, a look that said she didn't belong. She struggled to keep her composure, but she could feel her heart tightening. Stepping forward, she asked, "Are you sure there's no space for me? Maybe I can wait by the counter?" The server crossed his arms, smirking condescendingly, and answered in a dismissive tone, "I told you, no tables. This is not up for discussion." Evelyn felt the eyes of the entire restaurant now focused on her. She had never liked drawing attention, especially in moments like this, but this time was different. She wasn't just any customer. She was the mother of the owner of this establishment. While she didn't want to use her position, she knew she couldn't stay silent when her dignity was being trampled. Keeping her emotions in check, Evelyn continued, "Maybe you don't know who I am." The server looked at her with disdain, his tone dripping with disrespect as he sneered, "I don't care who you are. There's no place for people like you here." The words hit Evelyn like a lightning bolt, leaving her in stunned silence. She couldn't believe that such prejudice still existed in her own community, even in a restaurant owned by her son. It felt like a wave of familiar shame and injustice that she had endured throughout her life. But Evelyn was no longer a young girl easily intimidated. She had fought long and hard to protect her dignity. In that moment, the exhaustion of a lifetime of struggle washed over her. But then she realized, if she backed down now, she would be allowing this injustice to continue. And she was never someone who walked away from a fight. Sensing her silence, the young server grew more aggressive, mocking her with louder words. "Do you think you belong here? Just because you're a regular doesn't mean you fit in here anymore." He quickly glanced at her worn purse and old shoes, then returned his gaze with a look of utter disdain. Evelyn didn't back down. She wouldn't let this discrimination continue. With a surge of determination, Evelyn stood tall. Her mind raced back to her son, James. She had raised him, protected him, and fought for him through the most challenging times. She remembered when James, as a young black man, was repeatedly stopped and searched for no reason. She had fought against a system that was unjust to people like him. It had been a fight not just for James, but for respect and justice for people like them. And now, seeing this situation unfold, she knew she couldn't stay silent. At that moment, whispers began to ripple through the restaurant. The patrons began to glance up, noticing the escalating tension. Some pulled out their phones, recording the incident, and posts started to appear on social media. Comments about blatant discrimination spread quickly, and in this digital age, the truth couldn't be buried. People could no longer remain silent and witness such injustice without taking action. Evelyn scanned the room, her eyes meeting those of familiar faces. She knew that if she left now, she would feel defeated and powerless. And she couldn't let that happen. Not now. She took a deep breath and raised her hand, signaling for someone from the senior staff. "I want to speak with the manager." Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying resolve that caught the server off guard. His arrogance instantly shifted to confusion. He glanced at her with a humbled expression, as if expecting her words to be an empty threat. However, reluctantly, he turned and walked toward the back to call for his manager. As the server walked away, Evelyn stood firm, trying to collect her thoughts. All eyes in the restaurant were now on her. Whispers continued, but instead of judgment, they were now filled with curiosity. On social media, posts and videos about the incident were quickly spreading. A small sense of satisfaction stirred within her. Perhaps this was the moment to do something. To show that people like her never back down in the face of injustice, no matter how tired they may be. A few minutes later, the manager appeared from the kitchen, his face full of concern as he adjusted his attire. It was clear he had received messages about the situation and the attention it was drawing. The moment he saw Evelyn, his expression changed immediately. He recognized who she was, and that made him even more anxious. This was James's mother, the mother of the restaurant's owner. He approached, trying to ease the tension, but it was too late. The situation had escalated, and more customers were witnessing the conflict. "Ms. Evelyn," he began, approaching her, "I'm very sorry for this misunderstanding. Personally, I will make sure we find you a table." Evelyn looked at him calmly, yet firmly. She could let the manager resolve this, but she knew the issue wasn't just about finding a seat. This wasn't simply a case of poor service. This was systemic discrimination, ingrained even in places she once thought would always welcome her. People couldn't just ignore incidents like this anymore. "You don't need to apologize just because of me," Evelyn said with determination, her gaze sweeping across the room. "You need to apologize to everyone who's ever had to face discrimination like I have. This isn't a minor issue. This is part of a bigger problem that needs to be addressed." The manager hesitated, sensing the weight of the gazes now on him. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, the consequences would be much worse than a few dissatisfied customers. He had seen people recording the scene, and he understood that the story would soon be on social media. He didn't want his restaurant to become embroiled in a racial discrimination scandal. Meanwhile, James, who had seen a video of the incident, was rushing to the restaurant. He was angry and disappointed to find that this was happening in his own establishment, a place he had worked hard to build a reputation for hospitality and respect for all. As he walked into the restaurant, his face was cold and determined. He saw his mother standing tall in front of the manager and the server, who was trying to justify his actions. James quickly made his way over, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "What's going on here?" The server went pale as he realized who was standing in front of him. James didn't wait for an explanation. He looked directly at the manager, his voice firm. "Why does my mother have to stand here and endure this humiliation?" James stood there, his gaze unwavering and cold, giving the manager no chance to justify the situation. He turned to the server, his voice hard. "You're fired. Leave the restaurant immediately." The server didn't dare argue. His face contorted in shock and regret as he realized that his own prejudices had cost him his job. He didn't say a word, just lowered his head, turned, and quickly left the restaurant. All eyes were on him, and soon after, phones were pulled out, recording the moment. Videos of the server being fired and James's firm words began to spread rapidly on social media. The moment became a major turning point, not only for the restaurant but for society as a whole, as an incident of racial discrimination in a popular restaurant was brought to light. People could no longer turn a blind eye, and the strong reactions from the community began to spread. James turned back to the customers and staff in the restaurant. He couldn't remain silent. "My mother doesn't deserve this. No one should have to face discrimination like this," he said, his voice strong and resolute. "We all need to make sure that something like this never happens again. Now is the time for all of us to stand up." The crowd suddenly erupted into applause and cheers. The whole room seemed to explode with agreement and support, and in that moment, Evelyn felt a powerful surge inside her. This was a victory, a recognition of everything she and her son had fought for over the years. The community's support gave both her and James strength. Their struggle had not been in vain, and the power of social media had ensured that their story could not be forgotten. Though exhausted by everything that had happened, Evelyn felt a deep sense of pride for her son. Today was not just her birthday. It had become a symbol of the fight against injustice and prejudice. A moment when a small action, but one with a massive impact, from an ordinary person could change an entire community. After the server was escorted out, the atmosphere in the restaurant gradually calmed. James stood by his mother, thanking everyone for their support. "This restaurant is a place that welcomes everyone, regardless of race or background. We will do everything we can to ensure that something like this never happens again," he said. His words were met with loud applause, and the customers' support became a reminder to both James and Evelyn that the fight for equality is never over. Social media erupted with comments and videos of the incident, reaching a wide audience. Evelyn looked at her son, proud not just of what he had done today, but of the strength the community had shown when they stood up against injustice. This wasn't just a life-changing moment for them. It was a victory for all those who have fought and continue to fight for rights and respect. James promised to implement employee training programs, supporting initiatives to promote equality and tolerance. When the restaurant finally emptied, James's promises were not just words. They were his commitment, a protection for everyone who needed a safe, welcoming place, where there was no room for discrimination or injustice. Evelyn and James sat together, their eyes filled with pride and emotion, realizing that today was not only a significant milestone for their family, but also a mark of a struggle that was changing their community. They knew their story, their resilience in fighting prejudice, had inspired many, reigniting belief in justice and respect. And this story isn't over. Their journey, like each of ours in the fight against injustice, will continue to be written every day. Follow along as they continue to fight, share, and inspire the world in even greater ways. Hit follow and don't miss the next chapters.